Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? Not me. No way. Can't do it. Kevin Opar in the house. Bon matin, Kevin. Bien sûr. Hope you're all doing well. Let me know if my mic is coming through well. I had my children and all their friends over for dinner last night, and they were playing in this room. I'm pretty sure they didn't touch it, but don't know for sure. So if there's something wrong with the audio compared to other days, should be okay. But they were having a karaoke party in this room last night. All the homeschool gang was over. We had a sushi party. It was a lot of fun. I was visited as well by a Bitcoin colleague who's here doing some stuff. So that was fun. She has a new baby. Some of you probably know her, but I'm not sure what her OPSEC is. So I won't mention her name on the broadcast today. But she was down. We had a good time, and she got to meet all the Bitcoin homeschool lifestyle folks around here. So we had a great time, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. We got the Rumble chat going strong. How are the Rumble folks doing this morning? Chef Zero, thanks a lot. Audio sounds snappy and solid. Perfect. CB Van says, trade secrets, press all the buttons, enjoy the show. Indeed, we like the liking and the subscribing and the other button pushing. Go ahead and do it. JJ Fox says, good morning, great awakeners. Rise and shine today. California getting much needed rain and snow. Suntech hidden but functioning. Bitcoin running. Let's have some coffee. That's what we're going to do. You're stealing my line, JJ Fox. Record high Suntech for February 18th in my neck of the woods. Wow, that's good news, CB Van. We like record high Suntech. Citadel Daniel says, good morning, Bitcoiners. There is no record high Suntech where he's coming from. I know what the weather's like in Vermont. I keep it on my phone. I always know what it's like there. But I don't do any Schadenfreude. So I don't I don't like looking at it when it's when the difference is too great. I don't indulge. We need the sun, sunshine down on us. JJ Fox says, we love the sun. Morning, wake up gang. Charlosky in the house. Good morning, beloved Bampians. Quiet, the show is starting. Mike sounds great, thank you. Seems the volume was low compared to the intro music. Yeah, I can't help that. As long as it sounds okay when I'm speaking, that's all I can really control. The other interfaces are out of my hands. Chatelet escaped the Matrix. Indeed, I can complain. Winter blizzard in Saskatchewan now. Why we get blizzards? Come on, they're fun. Hello from Israel. Hello, Lucky. Welcome, welcome. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well. Probably gonna talk about Israel later today at some point. It comes up often, as you know. What do we got here? Bitcoin is running at 67,200 US trash tokens per Bitcoin. Morning, gang. Have fun staying poor in the house. Everyone sells Bitcoin at the price they deserve. Good morning, everyone. ES Empire in the house. Global warming hitting Kansas hard. We've been in the 60s for weeks. Charlosky says, hi, people. Noah in the house. We have good Suntech here in Wisconsin. Good to hear it. You were pretty low volume yesterday while on with Hank. Yeah, that would be their studio again. But maybe I was not on. Um, maybe I had the wrong mic on. Let me go listen to that again and find out. Nice and sunny today, Citadel Daniel says. Spring is coming. Sugaring season right around the corner. I can't wait. Indeed, I checked out the temperatures. You're going to get a few days near freezing. You'll be in the low 30s, high 20s for the next week, I guess. And then indeed, we call it sugaring season. If you guys who are not from our incredible Northeast don't know about sugaring season, it literally just comes out of the trees. If you don't tap it, it'll just keep coming out, right? Out of the leaves, or they're not leaves yet, but the twigs and the branches. As a kid, we used to sit under the trees that weren't tapped because they're just completely dripping in sap, and we'd let the sap hit us in the face, and it was always fun. We loved doing that. It was a good time. All right, everyone. Indeed, as you've all reminded us, we have a fully functional, operational sun technology. It's happening. And I looked. The money technology is also working. 67,000 US trash tokens will get you a whole Bitcoin, a whole slice of this money technology. We're doing great, everyone. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. There we go. There we go. So I have some good NPC news today. You're going to like it. The first one I have is from The Atlantic. You know, The Atlantic is always good for something, right? If ever I'm really hard up, I go to The Atlantic and then I know I'll get something good. And they decided to talk about Bitcoin today, so they made my life easy. So the first one I have here, guys, it's tough news. Wait till you hear. Oh no, guys. Oh no. Oh no. Look at this. Oh no. Bitcoin has been plummeting in value and interest in it is declining. Oh no. This is especially dangerous because it's a speculative asset, which is valuable solely because people think it's valuable. We're losing everyone. The Atlantic has said, no one cares. Wah wah. There you go. Thank you, Atlantic. We get this from the New York Times. A Potomac sewage spill becomes ecological disaster and political fight. Drew Holden adds, I'll let you in on a little media inside baseball here. You can tell Democrats are to blame for the largest sewage leak in American history because rather than blaming the Republicans in the headline, the New York Times just tells us it's a political fight. Good call. We get from The Guardian. The Guardian, we heard a little bit about this in the UN yesterday. Epstein files suggests acts that may amount to crimes against humanity, says UN experts. They're figuring it out just now. Way to go, UN experts. You're 12 years too late, but you're getting there. You're getting there. Independent reports appointed by Human Rights Council speak of grave nature regarding scale of atrocities against women and girls. They're getting there, guys. That's from The Guardian. Oh, and you're not going to believe it. So remember we were talking about yesterday with the Late Show and Stephen Colbert? Well, it turned out that CBS actually debunked him. They said, no. We didn't say you couldn't put the Democrat on stage. We said you can't put the Democrat on stage without putting a Republican on stage. So you can do what you want. You just have to do equal timing. And this was news to them, but Brian Stelter is here to weigh in on it. And this is what he says. This just in from CBS. The Late Show was not prohibited by CBS from broadcasting the interview with Rep. James Tellerico. The show was provided legal guidance that the broadcast could trigger the FCC equal time rule for two other candidates, including Rep. Jasmine Crockett, and presented options for how the equal time for other candidates could be fulfilled. The Late Show decided to present the interview through its YouTube channel with on-air promotion on the broadcast rather than potentially providing the equal real-time options. Thank you, Brian, for the update. Now we know. Now we know. Oh, we get this from the BBC. Oh no, what happened here? What happened here? BBC admit their Great Barrier Reef suffers worst decline on record. Headline was misleading. This is the data they were referring to. Uh-oh, what happened here? Great Barrier Reef suffers worst coral decline on record. And then we actually go and look at the record and what? Are you telling me that the Great Barrier Reef is growing? It's growing. There you go, guys. And we get this from CBC. I have some fun Canada stuff here. So first up, they wrote this a few weeks ago. Cortina isn't as cold as when it last hosted the Winter Olympics. Analysis finds fewer freezing decades than decades ago. And of course, this is in the climate change section of the CBC. But wait, there's more. What's this? Heavy snow upends Olympic freestyle skiing snowboard schedule. Uh-oh, too much snow. It's too much. It's too hot, but too much snow also. And I got more from Canada. Things are really not going great up in Canada. And here's a few headlines that just started coming out. CTV News: food inflation spikes 7.3% in January. Here's what's driving the increase. And then repeated in another thing, because this comes from the Canadian Press. And so let's read the article. Let's find out what is causing Canadian food inflation. All right, everyone ready? Everyone ready for what's causing food inflation in Canada? We're going to read the article. Here it is. This is what we got. We got this. So blah, blah, blah. We got some inflation, right? It's the tax holiday effect, everyone. It's because the government, because of inflation, gave a tax holiday. So it's because everything was cheaper because they took taxes, goods and services taxes, consumption taxes off at the counter. So that's the first reason. It was the tax rebate to deal with the inflation that is causing the inflation. Don't you see? But also, why the higher prices? She said much of today's higher prices are related to the weaker. Oh, it's because the dollar is shrinking in early 2025 as it's is losing value, as well as Canada's. It's the tariffs. Oh, it's the tariffs, which target grocery products such as Florida, or it's the American Florida orange juice. Everyone, it's Trump. Both of those factors make it expensive for importers to buy food and ingredients from outside the country. While the Canadian dollar has recovered somewhat and Ottawa dropped the bulk of its U.S. counter tariffs in September, Preston said impacts on the grocery supply chain. It's the supply chain. Now we get, luckily, the Bank of Canada is going to come in and weigh in on the inflation, right? The very bank that creates the Canadian dollar. Their analysis by senior economist Olga Bialik, released earlier this month, showed a tight correlation between food inflation and supply chain costs after accounting for a 6-month delay. Obviously, guys, you're sitting there wondering in Canada at the grocery store, why is everything so expensive? Is it because they printed money like crazy? No, 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 no. The person who printed the money like crazy said it's actually because of the correlation, all right, between inflation and the increased supply chain costs after a 6-month delay. That's all it is. It's that simple. You just have to take the increased supply chain costs and then put a 6-month delay in it, and then boom, you understand what's going on. That's why your groceries are so expensive. If you're in Canada and your family is wondering why you don't have a lot of meat on the table, just tell guys, once the increased supply chain costs are just factored over 6-month delays, that explains it. That's that simple. It's so simple. These things take time to show up in the retail level. So we expect to increasingly see cooler grocery inflation. It'll be much cooler. It's going to be so cool. So cool. It's just going to be so cool as we get more. It's going to be so cool. Some of the factors affecting grocery store inflation in Canada are global. It's the rest of the world's fault. It's droughts from years past. It's droughts from other years. We had a drought last year. And now in Canada, our eggs are so expensive. We had a drought, and now the eggs, the smaller cattle herds, tougher growing conditions for coffee beans. The coffee beans. I'm in the grocery store in Canada. Those fucking coffee beans again. The fucking supply chains with the coffee beans. Jesus Christ, what's going on here? Be it even as commodity prices put pressure on grocery store shelves across the world. In the United States, food prices rose 2.9% in January. What? We drink more coffee in Canada. We got more problems. Bialik, in her analysis, also pinned much of the blame for recent food inflation on rising import costs. It's imports, guys. Import costs. Foods like chocolate and coffee are facing higher prices globally due to extreme weather and trade tariffs. Guys, it's the weather. It's too hot. It's weather. Canada. Come on. That's what's going on, Canada. That's what's happening in Canada. What are folks saying? My Brian Stelter voice. You do a great Brian Stelter impersonation. Thank you. Kid alert. Yeah, pardon me, kid alert. I'm not sure how anybody lives with themselves who believe this stuff. Pardon me for the kid alert. I should have let you know. There you go. Putting my finger on the scale. Looks like Canadians have finally driven themselves crazy. I thought he had a great falsetto too. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. So that is what's going on. That explains the situation in Canada. Obviously, Olga figured it out, right? It's supply chains and import costs, right? It's simple, simple, very easy. We get it. We get it. We get it now. Now, this talk of Canada, of course, reminds me what I've been telling you, and I began telling you. Please go back and listen to the last ever version of the breakup, which I did the day after the Donald Trump election in 2024. And I ended up speaking at the Montreal Bitcoin meetup the following day. So election day was Tuesday. I did my show here with you all Wednesday and then took a break for a few months before I restarted it last January as The Great Awakening, the second iteration of this show. But that day, the last version of the show, if you remember what I began talking about, and I think I did much of the show on the subject of the future of Canada and the implications of Trump's win in the United States for Canada. And, I obviously leaned into the entire golden age idea that Trump is out there selling. Hold on. Am I coming through live here? Is there an internet problem? Oh, I see what's going on. No, no, no. I get it. I get it. There was an internet problem, but it was because I was watching the show on my cell network, and that must have experienced a momentary lag. Just let me know if I'm coming through. It says I'm coming through, but on my own broadcast where I'm getting your comments, my broadcast just ended and didn't come through correctly. So let me just make sure before I continue. YouTubers, you want to just let me know if it's still, if I have trouble, just so I have some sense in the backup here. No, it appears that nothing on my Rumble is working at the moment. Hold on. I can't even get on Rumble. Just give me a second, folks. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Tech is still working. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. We should be good. I'm just going to make sure that the folks over on Rumble are getting the love and attention I like to give to them. Rumble works here. Okay, very good. Happy lump day. Barely notice. 5-5 here. Okay, we're good. Clear as crystal. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Excellent. Okay, now I got it back to functioning correctly. And I can pause it. Working here too. Thank you, everyone, so much. So, indeed, if you go back and you remember on that last episode, if you haven't seen it, it's probably a good one. It was a fun day, if you remember. And at the Montreal event the following day, the Montreal Bitcoin meetup, I said to the 100 and something people in the live audience, and I was up there with BJ Dichter and a few other Bitcoiners, and we were just going to talk about the fallout about Canada. And I was sort of the host, and I was introducing the panel and participating in it. And I led with the same framework that I offered everyone the day after Trump won, which was Trump is going to grow the country. He's going to grow the United States, physically going to grow the United States, and that he had made his National Security Council all part of his tech bro contingent. He put no military people into his National Security Advisory during the transition. He didn't trust the military anymore, or at least the ones that would have come and helped on the economic questions and the national security economic questions. So, whoever he chose those folks so that they would bring a different perspective. And I said immediately that if you're putting these business people in charge of national security, then they're going to want to grow the country because business people understand that shrinking is dying. And if America is shrinking, then it's not going to win and it's going to die. And because you're either growing or you're shrinking when it comes to these national identities, nation states, all these kinds of things. So you're either shrinking or you're growing. America had entered a period of decline, and a lot of people felt it. When Trump put this private business council together to be his national security advisory, I just assumed immediately that the recommendation from them for national security would be grow. That simple, grow. And if you're going to grow as America, well, you'd likely grow in the most natural and convenient place, which was Canada. And because I understood the weaknesses of Canada, because of course I was around for the beginning of Trudeau, I was around for the end of Stephen Harper. For those of you who don't know, I worked for the Prime Minister of Canada before Justin Trudeau and got into Bitcoin because I understood at the time that the news was fake, that the Canadian conservative attitude of being good government and doing things well would convince people. But I knew because of the nature of the fake news in Canada that there was no way that was going to happen and that they were going to create and leverage their architecture of deceit to install Justin Trudeau. They couldn't help themselves. They had to have it. And so I knew this was coming. And it's one of the reasons why I was so open to the idea of Bitcoin in the early days and why I worked professionally in Bitcoin and abandoned politics, because my prediction at the time was politics probably not going to work out for anybody. The whole system looks like it is poisoned and falling apart. And this was before any of this Epstein stuff and all that. This was just plain old Obama years. And so when I saw the situation in Canada and I saw the situation in the United States, and you had both Obama and Trudeau running everything, I said, well, drastic measures are needed. That's what got me open to the idea of Bitcoin and starting to predict that actually we could change the world with Bitcoin. And from then on, that's what I worked in. And so I had a pretty good front row seat to the end, or the conditions that would lead me to believe Canada would have these problems. And so when I spoke at the Bitcoin meetup after Trump won the election, and I told the whole audience, this is going to happen. I don't think Canada can survive this election of Trump and everything else that's going on in the country. That was, of course, on the heels of the truckers and everything else that ended up happening in Canada during COVID. And so when I made that prediction, even the Bitcoiners on stage, BJ Dichter, one of the trucker convoy people, none of them believed me at the time, even the Bitcoiners. Now, people said maybe, but that was just a few weeks before the 51st state jokes began and Trump started going on about the 51st state and turning Canada into the 51st state, of course, after the disastrous meeting that Justin Trudeau ended up having at Mar-a-Lago when he went down when Trump was president elect. So the whole meme of 51st state and the idea of Alberta separation began just a few weeks after I brought it up publicly. But understand, I've been on this subject for a long time and have for a long time predicted that Canada would be toast and that it couldn't survive Bitcoin. Now, I'm not the only one who's predicted that. If you read The Sovereign Individual, that's probably the first time I'd heard out loud that Canada would likely be non existent if some form of digital currency like Bitcoin was created. And even independent, even personally, as a English Quebecer, I identified with Quebec's or Montreal city state sovereignty very early. One second, I got kids running around. Jeez, my kids are running in here with impunity. What is going on? They never come in this room when I'm doing my show. So when I started making these predictions and was convinced for these reasons that Canada would be toast, it didn't take that long through the Trump mandate for people to start seeing it. And so it brings me to this quote I saw from Elon Musk today, and I think it's a relevant one. So here's Elon Musk discussing what I'm talking about. It's something that I bring up on this show very often. Elon here says, predicting the future accurately is the best measure of intelligence. And I've been telling you that that's a Scott Adams ism as well. So I've been telling you for a long time. It's one of the reasons why we do predictions here, right? One of the reasons why I started the show in the first place was to do predictions publicly. The reason predictions in public are so important and relevant and useful is because they really do test your worldview at the time you make the prediction. So if you make a prediction and then it comes right, it's a good indication that your understanding of the world at the time you made the prediction was correct. And if it's wrong, right, if your prediction is wrong, you need to go back and understand what piece you were missing, and what led you to make an incorrect prediction. So, Elon Musk saying this is, and me mentioning it is to reiterate that this is a very powerful frame in order to gauge your worldview. If your worldview can predict, generally it's an accurate worldview. I don't know about measuring intelligence through it. Like, I'm not exactly sure what Elon is saying here. But it is one way of measuring your worldview, one way of measuring your understanding of dynamics, one way of measuring your understanding of incentives, right? I've often said that economics and Bitcoin, and understanding that we're dealing with a psychological commodity, allows you to see around corners, because it's not the math that's important, it's the incentives, it's the reasons why people want things and don't want things and are afraid of things. And understanding these incentive structures really does let you see around corners. It really does allow you to make predictions. Now, can't get everything right, but in general you can be directionally correct. And so when I said, just as I mentioned, as a young person, I was already sort of rooting for Quebec to be its own city state. I always identified more as a Montrealer than I did as a Quebecer, more as a Montrealer by far than I do as a Canadian. It's not even close. Like, I am, to this day, I never did. If you remember those hokey Canadians with their stupid Canadian flags on their backpack, never did that in my life. I put a Montreal flag on my backpack, and whoever understood what that was cool with me. It's just the cross of St. George with really beautiful symbols of the founding populations of Canada. So you have in there the Scottish thistle, you have the Irish clover, you have the English rose, the French fleur de lis, and now they've put in the Iroquois or Mohawk white pine in the middle. And so that's just a perfect amalgamation of the founding populations of Canada. And remember, Canadian means French Canadian, and there were two sorts of French Canadians. There were the coureurs de bois. So those were the voyageurs, they're also called. They're the people who used the river network of the St. Lawrence and explored all through the Mississippi. That's why it's St. Louis and Detroit and Louisiana. These are all French names. And they used that to create the entire fur trade and to expand that way. But you also had the habitants, the habitants. So there was the coureurs de bois and the habitants, the people of here, it means, the people from the river, basically, the people from the St. Lawrence River, which was like a superhighway. And Quebec always had a certain amount of population density because the river, from the early periods of colonization, remember, Quebec City is founded at the same time as Jamestown, Virginia, in the United States. And so within just a few generations, they had managed to turn the entire riverfront. If you can even look on the maps today and still see it, it's these thin farm plots, right? They're several miles long, but they only each get about 50 feet of riverfront. um, and so there was one house after the other the whole way on the river. So if you just went for a walk down the river, you would come across entire villages, churches. You would come across all of this real medieval style infrastructure built around this river. And so it created a lot of social cohesion. It's the reason why, when the French lost the American Indian War, sometimes known as the 7 Years' War, sometimes known as the World War 0.1, it was the conflict begun by George Washington in Ohio when he met those coureurs de bois, those French folks looking for furs. I think there's a movie coming out soon about that, about how George Washington launched the original World War, the Proto World War, the war that preceded the Revolutionary War and the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars. So this 7 Years' War, at the end of it, the conclusion of it, of course, it ends in Quebec City and the English win. And now the French are given tremendous freedom, let's say, compared to other civilizations that the British conquered. So the Irish never had a deal like the Quebecers got. Nobody ever got a deal like the Quebecers got. And what I mean by that is the Quebecers were allowed to keep their religion, they were allowed to keep their language, they were allowed to keep their legal system. So they used the not yet Napoleonic Code, but they used civil law, which was about to become the Napoleonic Code. They were allowed to use all of these French institutions that they kept having. And so, why did the British treat the French so differently than the Irish and the Indians and everybody else? Well, it was because the French actually controlled physical infrastructure. They controlled that river and they populated that river, and removing them and changing the land system from the seigneuries, they're called, so lordships, kind of a feudal organization. Changing those to the British system would have been too costly, too expensive, too difficult. And so they just said, okay, let's just leave the French as they are. Whatever it is they've created here over the last 200 years is too difficult and costly to move. And so what you ended up having was this very Christian Catholic nation of Canadians that formed along the St. Lawrence River and their maritime superhighway, and they were never able to have their language be wiped out because they already had a cohesive civilization. They already had the habitants who lived there and the coureurs de bois from their external network. So they already had this really interesting and strong foundation, so strong that the British Empire basically said, the best we can do is occupy. We'll never be able to assimilate these people. We'll never be able to convert them into true British people. Or at least we don't have a plan to be able to figure that out now because they are so ingrained in the land. Because these Catholics, these French Canadian Catholics, are so ingrained in the physical land. And remember that the St. Lawrence River goes right to Montreal because of the Lachine Canal. So it was everything from Montreal to Quebec City, all farmed, all already accounted for, already staked out. There were no more. You could have sailed from Quebec City to Montreal at that time and never seen an inch of forest along the river. It was farm, 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 farm. And so Canada really is born out of that. The rest of the people that came after the Revolutionary War in the United States, the so-called loyalists, they were not Canadian. They were British, and they were very proud to be British, and that's why they had to run away, because they were going to get tarred and feathered after the Revolutionary War. So you've got to realize that there are two different groups of people. There are the English Canadians who were British subjects, who were subjects of the Anglican Church and the Crown and all that stuff, who fled the American Revolution, mostly because they were more educated and they were already running the civil institutions. They were more educated and more ingrained in British society than the revolutionary folks were, who were just generally already Americans and just wanted their freedoms and all that kind of stuff. So it was generally the people who were already working for the state that had no concept of the Revolutionary War and didn't think they could possibly win. They basically bet on the wrong horse. And so, because, people wonder, why did Canadians walk 500 miles to not be free? Well, the other side of the coin was death, of course. They would be seen as enemy insurgents in the United States. And so they had to run away to Canada. So Canada had this really strange origin and of a suppressed French Canadian people, a conquered French Canadian people, but one that was allowed to keep its language being French, and its religion being extremely Catholic. They remained extremely Catholic for many, many years, and only up until recently, in the 1950s and 60s, did the intense Catholicism of Quebec start to break. Their Catholicism was so intense that Mark Twain, when visiting Montreal, actually declared it the most churches he's had ever seen in a city or something. And I think one of his quotes about it is, if you throw a brick, you're going to hell automatically, because you'll break a church window just because you can't miss. There's only church windows. So, and I butchered it, but it was some form of joke that Mark Twain said along those lines of, don't throw any stones, because that is enough to end up going to hell, because you're going to break a church window, because there's just so many church windows. And to this day, we have a lot of churches and stuff like that. So, my predictions for what's happening in Canada are rooted in this understanding of these people coming together, of what I experienced as a young man with separation and the threats of separation of Quebec and Quebec sovereignty, what it meant for the economy of Montreal and how it affected the economy in my area, and how it kind of in the 90s left us in Montreal not in the good times of the economy. It remained kind of like a depression right through the 1995 referendum and sort of up to the 2000s. It was a sort of depression to the point that that's what caused me to go to college in Waterloo, Ontario, because volume low, because I kind of didn't think that things were going to work out in Quebec very well. So I split to Ontario. Now things did rebound in Quebec in many good ways and ways that I enjoyed, and that led me to be a lot more involved in Quebec. I ended up going to Quebec City for law school. I ended up integrating much more into Quebecois culture than I ever had as a young man. And so when I sort of got all this understanding, and then of course when I worked in Ottawa for the Conservative Party and for the Prime Minister during their mandate, I was definitely a Quebecer. That's what gave me my access in a sense, because Canada has these federalism things just like the United States. So if you're like a California Republican, your value in DC to the federal nature of cabinet creation and balance across the federative union is just it's a lot of currency. It's a Democrat, Texan, or a California Republican. There's just not as many of them, so you've got a little more access because they have to have someone from California, right? The Republicans have to have someone from California, and so it was that kind of a condition that I enjoyed in Ottawa, and that's what allowed me to have all kinds of access. Is that I was a Quebecer, um, not a ethnic Quebecer. I'm not an ethnic Quebecer, only a little bit ethnically Quebecois. I'm mostly, of course, German and a potpourri of North American, and Irish and English and definitely some French Canadian in there. So it's what allowed me to sort of integrate and participate in Ottawa. I was, because I can speak French, a good enough Quebecer for them. So all of that background is important to understand, because seeing these predictions and then seeing what Mark Carney said yesterday really does end up giving us a sense of why Canada is going to die much faster. I told people when they would ask me what's the fastest Canada could die last year, and I said, if everything goes right, Canada, if a best case scenario, Canada might end by the end of 2025. They moved the referendum in Alberta around a bit. But when I saw Mark Carney, I said, this speeds things up. This really does make things happen a lot quicker, because never forget, Mark Carney is the fella who sicked the martial law on everyone during the truckers. So Mark Carney, when he started to get positioned to be the prime minister, it made me hasten my timeline. Now, if it wasn't for the referendum situation in Alberta last November getting pushed, it might have happened a lot quicker. But through some legal shenanigans, they have a bit of a stay on the execution of the federal order in Canada. But luckily, we've got Mark Carney on the campaign trail now, and he is doing everything he could possibly do to speed up the end of Canada. So he comes out yesterday and he predicts the following, or he says the following, right? If you remember Marco Rubio's speech, which we covered and many people covered, it got great press. In French, okay? In French, Mark Carney goes on stage in French. His French is terrible as well. I won't make you listen to it because it's just pathetic. It's actually honestly indefensible to hear a prime minister of Canada speak French this poorly. It's disgusting. He was not ready to be prime minister if this is his French level. I know the trouble they gave Stephen Harper when Stephen Harper had to learn French in order to be prime minister, and boy, did he become good at it as an adult. Mark Carney was given no such obligation, and they just let him go with this, mealy mouthed, disgusting, some of the ugliest French you'll ever hear in your life. Completely poorly conjugated verb. I mean, it's illiterate. It's actually illiterate French. It's not French. It's something completely different. So he comes up there and tries to make a contrast to Marco Rubio's speech about Christian nations having formed Europe, and that's a bond that America has with Europe, its Christian nations. So Mark Carney comes out there, the central banker, and says, Mr. Rubio has spoken, and the American administration from time to time talks about Christian nationalism. He says, it's not Canadian nationalism. Canadian nationalism is civic nationalism. So he tries to make this like nuanced point that no, it's the civic institutions of Canada. That's what makes us a country. And it didn't go over very well because it's also retarded. If you know anything about Canada's legal documents, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, um, anything, what I just said, everything about the history of Quebec being a bunch of Catholics, like, you can be against it being a Christian nation now. You can say that maybe isn't true, but that's not where it came from. It definitely 100% came about because it was a Christian nation. Go back to what I explained about the Montreal flag. These were all the same countries Marco Rubio is talking about. And in the case of the actual explicit acknowledgement of the religious origins of Canada, as Levant says, literally the first words in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms are, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Canada comes from the British Empire, which has an established church and whose monarch is the head of that church. He is our Canadian head of state. And 3, the words Protestant and Catholic are in our Constitution, acknowledging special rights for those Christian traditions. So lots of people having fun with this morning. You get Ross McLean here saying something similar. Carney is a godless Marxist who has never had the opening or closing of the Canadian Bill of Rights or the opening of the Charter of Rights. It is a Christian country, Canada, and not a secular civic nationalism. The Marxist lies he is saying here, notably in French. Quebec is even though Quebec is becoming a atheist, there's a debate about how atheist Quebec ought to be going forward. But none of the people in the debate in Quebec would deny that Quebec was begun as a Catholic state. There's a reason why, even in Canada or in Quebec, even the most militant Quebecois, Péquists, sovereignists, statists, lefties who know everything about Quebec's history and all that, even they have trouble even acknowledging a leader before Duplessis, a premier, a prime minister, a governor of Quebec before Maurice Duplessis in the 1930s to 50s, because the Catholic Church ran the place. There was no need, like there were technically elected leaders, but nobody cares about them. They were not popular. They were not powerful. The church ran everything. And it was explicitly known by all involved as a Christian country. It's to the point where a lot of the sovereignists, the lefty Marxist folks, actually want to change that, but they acknowledge it's the truth about the history. There's no denying it. So here you get Nico Logan saying, today Mark Carney said there is and not only to that, he goes further and says, today Mark Carney said there's a battle starting between Christian nationalism and Canadian nationalism. He continued by saying it's important to protect our country, but it's more important to protect our system of rights and respect all people who live here. Carney is implying that Christians are the problem. Yet we are the most persecuted religious group in Canada. There's churches getting burnt all the time. My Christian ancestry built this country, and without them, it wouldn't exist. Unfortunately, we've allowed foreigners who don't embrace our culture to dictate what this country has become. Now we're the problem. It's clear that Carney is coming after us. Time to wake up, brothers and sisters. And you get this from JJ McCullough as well, saying this is another example of Carney making an entirely gratuitous, undiplomatic swipe at the Trump administration for no reason beyond pleasing his anti-American voter base. Also, Carney has this weird idea in his head that America is not diverse. He brings it up a lot. Now, what you need to understand as well about Canada is that indeed there is a difference from America. It is not, we hold these truths to be self-evident, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not how Canada was founded. That's a difference, right? What we do know, though, is Canada was founded on something called peace, order, and good government. Some people say keep peace, order, and good governance. That's at least how they taught it when I was in school. Otherwise known as POG, and in Canada we'll call it POG, right? So POG. POG is actually kind of a legal administrative analysis when you learn constitutional law or admin law in Canada. POG, Peace, Order, and Good Government of Canada, is here, and you'll see it's a big part of what happens. It shall be lawful for the Queen, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and the House of Commons, to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada in relation to all matters. So a POG test is something that actually exists. Like, it's unconstitutional if it's not for peace, order, and good governance. So this POG thing is the standard by which Canada should and ought to be measured. And so again, the reason why you can put a timeline on Canada now is because they've done none of these things. None of them. And so here we can see, again, going back to the groceries, same groceries, same quantities, very different prices. Many Canadians are noticing the gap between food prices at home versus south of the border. Here's eggs are twice as much in Canada than the United States. Chicken, well over 2x. Ground beef, less than 2x, but almost barely. Steaks, 2x compared to the United States. Bread, 2x compared to the United States. As someone who does do groceries in both countries, I can tell you this is true. Right, this is exactly what's going on. There's a few exceptions. There's a few things that can be a little cheaper in Canada versus the United States. I play a lot of arbitrage games across the border when it comes to groceries, but this is more or less my perception. This is what I see. And peace, order, and good governance. Lots of people talking about the food inflation. Here's the food professor who comes on a lot. We're coming up to a year of Carney being in power, and food prices are up higher than they've ever been. He isn't fixing anything. He's making things worse and smiling while he's doing it. You've also got this on immigration, one of the most insane stats I've ever seen. Look at Canada at the bottom. 99% of its growth, over 10 million people, was from immigration. This is the rest of Europe. They're all up. 14 would be a high in Austria, 13 in the Netherlands, 19 in Sweden. Canada up at 35% increase in population as a result of immigration in just the last few years. So not exactly peace, order, and good governance. And you can already see it's having an effect on the population. TikTok saying, I've been traveling to Canada for 20 years. I love Canada and Canadians. Most friendly folks, at least they pretend. Since Trudeau took over, a certain degree of unhappiness has crept into Canadians. They aren't the same anymore. That is true. This moment in the Olympics is also sullying Canada quite a bit. This curling guy, just the worst phenotype, just a dick. Eric Thorvaldson says the following. This is a watershed. A lot of people online talking about this guy cheating. You're not allowed to push the rock with your finger. This is when the rest of the world realized what Canada's true national character was. Not polite, friendly nation we pretend to be, but entitled, thin-skinned cheaters who scream, how dare you film us, the second our rule breaking gets exposed. This is when the rest of the world saw Canadians' true colors: ugly, hypocritical, delusional, hubristic, and pathetic. They aren't going to forget anytime soon. Oh, Canada. Have you seen a country's identity, value, brand value? Has anyone ever seen anything like this? How many people could have told you a few years ago? Now, I've been saying for quite a while that Canada was doomed. I didn't start saying it out in public until the truckers, well, COVID in general made me think, they might not make it through this. This is bad. I only really returned. I'd forgotten about Canada kind of when I left and moved to New York City before the Harper administration ended and before Trudeau was installed, but I could see that stuff coming at the time. So when I started to go back to Canada as a result of COVID and George Floyd and leaving New York City, and I returned to Canada, I saw how COVID had already made crazy people everywhere. I said, this is the beginning of something. So I made that prediction then, and I've been making it publicly ever since. And now I don't think Canada. I mean, there's a really good chance it's over this year. I think at this point, I don't see any force. You're probably going to get a Carney majority because the anti-Americanism stuff in Canada is so easy to sell those retarded people. So they're going to sell it to them, and the Canadians are going to buy it, but they're not really going to understand the consequences until it is too late, which is when Alberta does its own referendum, and then once Quebec isn't getting the 14 billion, they're not going to be around in transfer payments. They're not going to be hanging around with Canadians anymore. So the federal nature of Canada is, and don't forget, we have divorce papers in Canada as well. So the nature of the country, to me, says the game theory here just doesn't hold. I think that the predictions you saw in the sovereign individual, exactly as Elon Musk said, is a sign of intelligence. The folks who wrote The Sovereign Individual were very smart. You can just tell by the lack of entropy that has entered what that book is talking about, right? And by lack of entropy, I mean you can read it today and it's more useful today than it was in the 90s. Like it reads as a better understanding of what's going on in the world than it did even in the 90s. Peter Thiel's intro to it is the new intro that he wrote for it is excellent and really does give a lot of context. He fixed the one little bit of entropy that was in it, that was the rise of China and what all that meant. But that is a useful book and indeed a sign of intelligence, because this is what peace, order, and good governance has brought Canada. Here's another unbelievable euthanized story, right? This is from just yesterday. Distraught family blasts Canada for euthanizing son 26 who suffered from seasonal depression. Imagine in Canada, they will kill you for seasonal depression. In Canada. In Canada. How many people in Canada would qualify for killing themselves for seasonal depression? We have the worst winters in the world. It's so cold and like everyone could die from this. And I think it already is like the top 5 cause of death in the country. So Canada is simply not sustainable. And even here, they're all confused now with Carney's deal with China. Here's a New Liberals saying the state of U.S. Canada relations aside, clearly the driving factor here. It is pretty abhorrent. This is talking about Carney just yesterday saying we're renewing Canada's relationship with China. And New Liberals say, and with the whole NPC, Greenland flag, Taiwan flag, globalist, Ukraine, even these sludge people saying the following. The state of US Canada relations aside, clearly the driving factor here, it is pretty aberrant to see the otherwise liberal Democratic leader flirting this hard with China, especially just days after they threw Jimmy Lai, a Bitcoiner, in prison. Don't forget, Jimmy Lai's last act as a free man was to take over the front page of his newspaper in 2019 with a Bitcoin advertisement just before they arrested him and said, Bitcoin will never leave you. And Jimmy Lai there saying it. And here we see liberals being genuinely shocked to discover the concept of geopolitics is so funny to me. They genuinely bought the good versus evil stuff. And indeed, you can see what China's already up to. Beijing's recent attacks have followed its familiar pattern of hostage diplomacy, only this time the hostages are economic. The Chinese Communist Party has essentially taken Western farmers hostage. I told the Wall Street Journal, this is what they've done to Canada. Beijing squeezed Canadian canola until Ottawa agreed to open its market and subsidize Chinese-built EVs. It's been doing the same to European dairy and American soybeans. The tactic is simple. Find a politically influential sector in the target country that's become dependent on Chinese consumers and can't quickly adjust and drop trade barriers until they scream. And that is what they did. That's why Canada is in all of this trouble, and that it's news to them that China is double crossing them and is difficult is sort of the funny part, right? That's the part where you get the LOLs and the laughs, right? Hold on, I thought I had. Let me just see. I thought I had a Trump quote here, but I'll get it for you. Where is it? I literally just saw it. Oh, there we go. No. Anyway, Trump just maybe I'll try the Trump Truth Social. Where's Trump Truth Social? Top. Yeah, Truth Social Trump. Hmm. I was sure I saved it, and now I can't find it. Last chance for me. Oh, there it is. Got it. Got it. I got it. So, with all of that said, all the stuff that we just heard going on with China and all that, Trump says if Governor Carney thinks he is going to make Canada a drop off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. If Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So plans not going as they expected for these folks. And here's Tom Luongo describing what might happen in Canada, saying Carney was installed as prime minister to set Canada up as the US's Ukraine. This plus Europe's immigrant invasion will form the core for the last war they will try to fight to take back the wayward colony, but it ain't going to work, guys. It ain't going to work. So no war coming to Canada. It looks like even better, even better. We're going to get massive amounts of peace and a whole peace dividend coming here. Make sure I have this. And you can see that whole deal that they've got going on here, the Tom Luongo idea of war between the British system and the American system. Of course, here's a little more proof that this is kind of what's going on as Russia and the United States continue to negotiate for peace. They've been going at it for days and hours. There's Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Here, the British sent their negotiators. British PM Keir Starmer sent a team of diplomats without an official invite to the venue. And in the end, we saw that without their official invite to the venue, they just had to sit around and wait. So, kind of perfect. So Trump definitely playing hardball with these folks, and I think you're going to continue to see this American system emerge. And speaking of predictions, so I didn't just predict that Canada was toast. I predicted America was going to grow, and I predicted not only was America going to grow, one of the more, let's say, out there predictions I made for 2026, and I think I've made it publicly several times. I think I made it publicly on just recently on Hank's show. It's that you will see a bridge. Not only will you see Russia and American peace after all of this Ukraine business, you will see them commercially integrated. And one of the great signs of commercial integration is they're going to actually build some form of connection between Alaska and Russia in order that Russia can come and start extracting resources from Alaska and helping Americans, because Americans have a lot of work to do. They have Venezuela, Greenland, Canada. There's a lot going on. Cuba, Guyana. There's a lot going on in America. And so they're going to need help, especially in the Arctic. And we get this report from the peace deals here. The Economist claims, and this is from The Economist, they're running this article today. And remember, what we know about The Economist is they are part of that British system. Will investing in Russia really bring America a $12 trillion bonanza? The Kremlin is making big promises to Donald Trump's administration. This is what's going on in the peace negotiations right now. And this is what Brian McDonald writes. The Economist claims that Moscow pitched Washington what it privately dubbed the greatest deal in history, a sweeping Russia-US economic package framed as so transformative it could earn both Putin and Trump a Nobel Prize. The magazine alleges that a Russian Security Council memo prepared ahead of last year's Alaska meeting bundled Arctic oil and gas, rare earths, data centers powered by nuclear energy, even a Bering Strait tunnel if the US eased sanctions. Kremlin aides, including RDIF head Kirill Dmitriev, had held repeated talks with Trump envoys, it says, while US lawyers quietly explored how sanctions might be unwound. This is one of my best predictions ever. And this is what is going to happen. You're going to see physical infrastructure. You're going to see peace and partnership between Russia and the United States. And with those two things intact, you have the makings of an engine that is completely different than what we've known until now of central bankers like Carney and this British extractive colonial system running the world. And that's really the fight we're in. It is that is a big part of what's going on in the world today. And so Canadians weirdly on the front lines of this battle. Like I said, the truckers, the disintegration of Canada, Canada being a prize lost by this British system is going to be one of the biggest signs that the American system is winning. And that you can really, I think, see now why Canada is going to be known as one of the biggest participants in World War III, heroically, even like heroically. Now, it's not the Canadian civic institutions; those are going to be blamed for destroying the country. It's nothing what Mark Carney said, but Canadian being a Canadian is always going to be a thing, right? We did end up making a country. I don't think Quebecers are ever going to get the name Canadian back. I think they'll always be Quebecers, and there'll be something like a regional identity, just as there's a regional identity for Californians or West Coasters or Yankees or Southerners. Canadians will keep their identity. Ottawa doesn't make us Canadian, not even close. There were all kinds of things that made Canadians Canadians at a certain time, and they were subtle things. They were things like, the thing that used to make me the proudest about being Canadian. It's nothing to do with the healthcare. The thing that used to make me the proudest about being Canadian is you could use any public washroom in Canada. They were all clean and amazing. I could not go anywhere near a public washroom in the United States as a teenager or in my 20s or anywhere else in the world for that matter. Canada was really at the Japan level of conscientiousness and a public thoughtfulness, and we're just not even close to that anymore. Canada's become a dump. It's filthy. Only Quebec still has pride in its where it is and what it's doing and its land and its cities and all these things. Calgary's not looking good compared to the Calgary I knew. The Calgary I knew when Stephen Harper was prime minister, if you spat your gum on the ground, it was Singapore style, man. You would be shamed. People would yell at you. People would yell at you. It's filled with homeless people now. Filled. Unbelievable to me. Unbelievable to me as someone who spent time there during the Harper years, the boom years of Calgary between 2006. I was there on my way home from the Olympics, and it was euphoria, the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, and it was absolute euphoria. So again, we're in this war between systems, and Canadians are a big part of it. Like I said, here's Canadians doing good work. Two of them, Dominic St. Onge, a Canadian living in the States, and this other Canadian here, a Canadian live blogs voting. So one of the interesting things about Canadians is that we are also American. And by being from America, we understand the United States in certain instances even better than Americans. And we understand a lot, we can integrate so easily into American culture. And here's an example of that playing out perfectly. This Canadian in 2024, I voted as a Canadian citizen in California. I voted for Donald Trump to prove how fraudulent California was for the 2024 election. Canadian live blogs voting for California fresh off the plane. I was told this is impossible. Now, I joke that I voted for Joe Biden 5 times. That was like a trick I used on people in after Joe Biden stole the 2020 election. I would always say, well, Trump was really probably not great for Bitcoin in his first term because he could actually give legs back to the dollar. I'm more interested in the repo rumble and the big print of Joe Biden that came from COVID and that Trump initiated. And I love the idea of the stolen 2020 election and no one believing it, because yeah, it's kind of better for my worldview, which is separate money and state. So let's just go for acceleration. And so I used to make this joke instead of arguing with people. For a long time, I would say to them, yeah, I voted for Biden 5 times because Trump was just not great for Bitcoin because he was too good for America. And I had a different bet. And people would always look at me like, what are you talking about? And I say, yeah, I voted for him 5 times. And the reason I say that is because I was indeed, and it's when I fled the United States, when I was sent 5 ballots to my address in Brooklyn, and there was not a single eligible voter in the House. My kids are American; they're born in the United States, but they can't vote. They were little babies, and so no one was eligible to vote there. I, didn't have. I had a green card, but I didn't have citizenship to vote. But it would have been very simple for me to have cast those 5 ballots, and so I often, even though it's not true, would say that I did vote because there was nothing stopping me from voting. There weren't even 5 people in the House, and we got 5 ballots. So this is completely true and has been true for a long time. And so Canadians here using performance art to engage the American electoral system, again, go back to this time and go back to these predictions and how important these predictions are. And this is something that I said as they were I predicted the 2020 election was going to be stolen. Very few people got 2016 correct. I did. I knew Trump was going to win from the Mexican rapist speeches on. I never, ever, ever doubted it, except for the Billy Bush Sunday one afternoon. I doubted it. Other than that, any day you would have met me from June 2015, when Trump came down the escalator, and then the Mexican rapist speech. From that day on, from Rosie O'Donnell, the Rosie O'Donnell thing, I listened to that live, and that also blew me away. The minute I heard the Rosie O'Donnell thing, I said, "This is the greatest show on earth. He's going to win by a long shot." I never doubted it. Before Trump was a threat, no one really bothered with me. Before he won, you could say those things, and people thought it was cute and funny, and they'd go, "Really, why?" And it didn't really bother them that the TDS hadn't set in yet. There was TDS, but not like there is today. And if you remember, so I got that one right. I said, Trump's going to win 2016. I predicted that no one would believe the 2020 election. Either way, I said, I think Joe Biden is going to win because it's a scam. And I called that very early. And, there's even work at Kraken where you can see that I was trying to build products. I was trying to compete against SBF's original prediction market for the 2020 election. Before there was a poly market, it was actually owned by FTX. And I said, let's just take over this market. It's going to be a big deal because the election will be hung, and they're going to use these data points after the election in order to talk about the election. So I was on that. And then, of course, 2024, I'm one of the first people, as you all know, that said Trump from the moment they arrested him. I think is when I came out in 2022 live with all of you and said, he's going to win. He's going to become the next president. He's going to come back. Not only that, I predicted he'd be a Bitcoiner. And so, again, it's important to reiterate, predictions coming true are a sign you sort of get what's happening. Now, one of my best predictions ever, right? Canada dying, all that stuff is great. But one of the best I made in public was on television, and it was about 2019 and the repo market. And you get a sense of why we're seeing this. Here's Bark saying, something broke in 2019. Nothing has felt right since. Everyone knows it. Nobody can explain it. It's got almost 500,000 views. Lots of people talking about 2019 and all of that stuff. And go back to what I said, why I did a whole tour of television, Sightbringer talking about it here. Something really did crack in 2019. What was it? The fracture point hides in plain sight inside a cluster of events that look ordinary when viewed one by one, but add up to a phase transition when you overlay them. First, the financial plumbing coughed. I said and predicted there would be such a thing as COVID. I didn't know about the virus. I said they're going to have to print like crazy within months. Otherwise, the system is going down. It's finished. And so here in September, the overnight repo market seized, and the Federal Reserve was forced to inject liquidity every evening just to keep Treasury collateral moving. That was the earliest public hint that a decade of zero-rate leverage had saturated the system. Policymakers papered it over, yet pressure kept building below the surface. So I said exactly that. The Joe Weisenthals, it's technical, you Bitcoiners, you're too stupid. We were the only ones right. I've said many times, if there was such a thing as real journalism, CoinDesk would have won every award in 2019 for predicting this. Not COVID. We predicted a huge print, which is the real story of COVID in the end. And so, because the print and the masks and the mandates and the voting and the paper ballots, that's the story, right? So here, policymakers papered it over, yet pressure kept building below the surface. Second, global supply chains hit peak just in time. So supply gut, velocity. Fourth, virology circles in Wuhan noticed patients with atypical pneumonia. Finally, demographic torque flipped, and indeed here. So the intuition that nothing has felt right is accurate. The reference frame most people carry in their heads was calibrated to the 2010-2018 equilibrium. That world relied on abundant dollar liquidity, frictionless trade, pre-TikTok social media, benign epidemiology, and demographic patience. The 5 pillars wobbled at once in 2019. We are not going back. We are still mapping the new terrain. And the new terrain is what we've experienced since then. And it's what I've been talking about, because that's more or less when I start doing this show every day. And so from that point on, I start saying, okay, Trump is going to be a Bitcoiner. We're going into a new economic system. We're going into something completely different. And again, going back to the elections, which I predicted in 2020 would be completely stolen and would lead to all of these outcomes. I even predicted, right, at the fallout, when it was clear the elections were being stolen, I said, we'll only get through this when we can talk about Russia openly again. And that was my actual, as the election's happening, November 4th, 5th, 6th, the days after the election, I'm thinking about Russia. What do we know now? What's happening now? Of course, John Solomon coming, one of the great Russia investigators, comes out and on Dan Bongino's shows yesterday discusses the SAVE Act, which I've been telling you about here for a long time, the Save America Act, and President Trump revealing evidence foreign governments meddled in the 2020 election. I think Trump is going to change the narrative in America. I think he's going to change some senators' minds, and he's going to do it by revealing some of the intelligence that Chris Wray, Chris Krebs, and other officials in charge of the integrity of our elections kept from the American people. We're going to see that our foreign adversaries have monkeyed in our system more than we know, more than the foreign driver's license that came into Chicago, more than China sending fake driver's licenses to help Joe Biden. And I think when senators realize their state could have been targeted and their contention of the identity of some of their voters could have been assumed, I think there's going to be a different debate in America. I think there's some big, significant, and very troubling revelations about the vulnerabilities of our elections that the president is about to unveil to the American public. If you didn't know, John Solomon is part of this theater show. When he started covering Russia, he was approached by people in the black clothes and said, keep going. And he's been fed interesting information and leaks by these folks before. You could think of him as an advanced scout hype person for Trump. He starts telling you a few days before what you're about to hear. That's been the pattern with John Solomon. He's got the closest view into what's going on with Russia, and all the fallout of Mueller. And that's why I do believe we're going to see something like election day. Here's Harmeet Dillon, not election week, people. Your attention to this matter is required. Indeed, talking about election day, no more paper ballots, no more pre-voting, no more digital machines. Mike Lee talking about what's going to be needed for the filibuster. When the team with the home court advantage fears what winning requires, it loses. Let's not be that team here, talking about all that's needed for the filibuster. Arthur McWaters saying requiring proof of citizenship to vote is one of the most popular policies of all time. It's stuck in the Senate. The reason it's stuck is that the minority literally can refuse to vote by sleeping. The will of the people is roadblocked with zero effort to by the silent filibuster. No debate required, no end cap. If we can't at least require the talking filibuster debate vote, then we are cooked. This is legitimately absurd, but I do believe they're going to get it. Here you've got Mike Lee speaking with Glenn Beck. I think I need to redo this so you can listen to it. Sometimes I need to do it so the audio comes through correctly. And that is not what I had in mind. And there we go.
I'll be filibuster. You just say, nah, I don't like that bill. I'm going to vote against cloture. Cloture is a vote that takes 60 It brings debate to a close by force of will of the Senate. So that's the zombie filibuster. All you have to do is say, I'm not going to support cloture. I will vote against cloture, or you vote against cloture when the time comes. No speaking required. What I believe is that we ought to, for some legislation, including and especially this one, we ought to bring back the talking filibuster. If they want a filibuster, make them speak. We've made it way too easy for them for way too long. It's time to take action, especially on a bill like the Save America Act that's supported by, as you point out, about more than 2 out of 3 Democrats and more than 4 out of 5 Americans on average on the whole. It's not that often you find a bill like this one that is that popular and is still opposed strongly by members of one party in the United States Senate. This is a case not just of Democrats versus Republicans. This is about Washington, D.C. versus everybody else. But the Republicans in Washington are with the people. Democrats are against them.
Why won't the Democrats? I mean, I know that it's complex to do it this way. You have to have, a certain number of Republicans all there all the time to make sure that it, you don't change the legislative day. It just has to keep going. So you need to have a quorum there. And they have to continue to speak. This to me is, Susan Collins said, I'm not for, getting rid of the filibuster. I'm not for getting rid of the filibuster either. I think this gives the filibuster teeth, quite honestly. Yeah. You make it the way it's supposed to be made.
This is the filibuster. This is what the filibuster is. So we're preserving this.
Right, I know.
By restoring the talking filibuster.
I know.
That's what it is.
Correct. I know. So I don't know why they say that this is going to destroy, because I think that's just a lie. But the second thing on this is, why are the Republicans seemingly afraid to make these guys stand up in front of the American people, stop the government for possibly weeks on end, to defend something that even their own party is for? Why wouldn't you see that as a giant win for the Republicans?
Senate Republicans should absolutely see this as a giant win, which it is, undeniably. Look, the American people understand that we need to be fighting, and they'd be happy about this.
So my prediction here is that it's about action versus inaction. And as you know, Trump is a man of action. And that's really the system that's the systemic fight that we see behind the curtain, the one that Susan Kokinda brings up, the one that Tom Luongo brings up. Again, it is the American colonial system: do, build, act, move, go to the frontier, versus an extractive economic system that is all about bringing the resources from the colonies back to the institutions and systems that benefit from it in a hierarchical top-down structure: British banks, London, all of that stuff. So it is about systems action, and this is a great contrast, right? They could do a zombie filibuster, or they can do a talking filibuster. And it's kind of a microcosm of everything that's going on. The talking filibuster is obviously a fiat thing. The zombie filibuster is obviously like a fiat thing. The talking filibuster, because it's a proof of work, you actually have to work, you got to do it. So we're seeing this increase in consciousness, let's say, this increase in the capacity for the same memetics that drive Bitcoin: the proof of work, the don't trust verify in the elections, an auditable system, proof of work in a real filibuster, a talking filibuster. So adding all of these things up together and seeing that we're in this systemic change, it's voting, it's election systems, it's financial systems. You can mix all of that up and you can actually see that people are already, of course, voting with their feet. And this predicts very well. Seeing product market fit, let's say, or lack of product market fit, can often be judged by just bodies moving somewhere. And here, what we see in California, for example, is a prime example. Palantir, of course, moving to Florida yesterday. Steve Muir here pointing out In and Out, Hewlett Packard, Oracle, Tesla, SpaceX, X, Twitter, Chevron, Realtor.com, Paul Mitchell, Charles Schwab, Palantir, Norton, Symantec. Well done, Gavin Newsom. Those are all the companies that have left California already. You've got this Palantir announcing that it's moving its HQ to Miami on the same day Mamdani announces tax hikes in New York City is just comical. The shift of the financial center of gravity in the U.S. towards the southeast is accelerating. There's Will Clemente pointing out the shift of the center of of gravity of the U.S. economy moving south and east. And if you didn't know, the whole Mamdani story is pretty funny. So he has to go backtrack on his cold thing, the encampments. That's already changed. Mamdani brings back homeless encampment sweeps, turning on campaign promise after backlash over cold weather deaths. Sean Fitzgerald says after 20 people died in the cold, it turns out Mamdani was perfectly capable of going back to the policy he had in place during the ancient times of before January 1st, 2026. Odd because I was told that it was impossible last week when his supporters were excusing the deaths. And indeed, he came out yesterday with his budget. Very funny stuff. If you're a New Yorker, probably less funny. We are forced to raise our rainy day fund, retiree benefit fund, and increase property taxes. And Fisher King says property tax increases on landlords will be passed on to their 20 to 40 something professionals who pay roughly 50% of their incomes in taxes, federal, state, city income taxes, high sales taxes in the form of rent increases. It's really not worth it for the clubs and restaurants. And you can see tough times coming for New York. Daniel Friedman comments on this New York City budget. We have two paths. Either we do massive wealth confiscation that drives businesses from the city, or else we impose huge burdens on ordinary New Yorkers to fund our inefficient and unsustainable programs. But the one thing we don't do is cut welfare benefits for illegal immigrants. Very funny indeed. And now compare that to what Trump is doing, right? Just compare that to what Trump is up to. Compare that we are in a world of action. We're in a world of economic systems competing against each other. We're in a world of extraction and socialism and top down structures versus actually building. And Trump and his golden age rhetoric is starting to come into focus. And again, it's not just the SAVE Act that's going to buttress Republicans by the time the midterms come. My prediction is it's the financial windfall that comes from the subordination of the Federal Reserve, the reinstitution of the constitutional republic through the Treasury, embracing Bitcoin and all of these energy systems that come about as a result of Bitcoin mining and AI data centers. And here, indeed, the Japan-US trade deal has officially launched. 550 billion US trash tokens by Japan into the United States, funding of LNG facility in Texas, funding of gas power plant in Ohio, funding of critical minerals plant in Georgia, and America's true allies being Japan and Saudi Arabia and UAE, all of these folks interested in this new economic system coming around. Of course, the Moscow thing I already mentioned, another part of the action and increased economic output. Here's Ashton Forbes also reminding us that the next gen nuclear reactor that I talked about yesterday. We also have fusion, which we haven't added to the mix. Don't forget the Trump Bitcoin holding company is also, and the holding company of Truth Social. The vehicle he created to weaponize, really just weaponize the evil done to him by censoring him. Like, I've always loved that Trump was able to weaponize and create Truth Social and now add to it nuclear fusion and Bitcoin. This was the vehicle created because they kicked him off the internet, which is just hilarious. So all of these things actually getting built and seeing, the beginning of a golden age. Here's just a great example: farming, right? This is some laser farmer. Can't you just see this stuff? Agricultural development coming around. Here's Will Tanner, who you know from a lot of the Rhodesia content, saying, I've been long interested in agricultural development, and there's some fascinating stuff here, particularly the general shift from present row crop agriculture to precision agriculture that substantially reduces inputs, particularly chemicals, seems almost as epoch shifting as the late 19th century shift to mechanized agriculture. But unlike that one, which raised yields by ravaging the land, precision agriculture, which its focus is on using the land well and reducing inputs, seems calculated to do the opposite. Yet further, the focus on American-made equipment would have the same benefits as the mechanization of agriculture in building good American jobs around equipment production. In any case, exciting stuff, and I love the renewed attention agriculture is getting. It's going to be a big feature. I told you when all of this stuff started, People ask me, what are the jobs of the future? I always say the new jobs are the old jobs. Farmer is going to be a great job. We want, if you go on a Bitcoin standard, no more Wall Street financial engineers as the highest paid. It's the old fashioned cattle ranchers being one of the great jobs for folks on the continent again. And now, thinking of all of this action and what's going on and systems up against each other and clearly signs of the golden age piercing through, and you've got John Solomon talking about the Save Act again, that prediction I made at the beginning of the Biden administration, which was that we'll have to be able to talk about Russia, with the Russia deal here, with all of these new economic systems with Russia and America seemingly getting ready for a form of partnership and cooperation, which has been the nightmare of this London city system since the beginning of the American Revolution. And of course, during the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln's famous letter to the Tsar of Russia prevented any physical incursions into America by the British Army and support of the Confederates and allowed America to settle its own civil war amongst itself and come back together and create the America we all know and love out of that. So again, go back to my prediction. We got these two systems now competing. You hear John Solomon already saying we're going to learn more about the elections, but don't forget, my prediction was that we would be in the right place if we have a national conversation about Russia for real. And look who's bringing it up right on schedule. It couldn't be more perfect. Hillary Clinton yesterday. I told you it was big news that her and Obama were back in the news trying to make headlines and stir things up. But it looks like the death pangs of the old system. She comes out with very pathetic, weak sauce. I think the effort that Putin and Trump are making to profit off the misery and death of the Ukrainian people is historic error and corrupt to the ninth degree. And Tim Young says, oh, look, she's still pushing the same Russia hoax that she created when she lost the election a decade ago. And indeed, it's time to be able to talk about that, because this is what is troubling the American psyche. What if alt hist here, mentioning nearly every single time the issues are brought up, the response is denial. This era of history will be remembered as one of the lowest lows in human history, not for active evil like murdering villages, but for passive evil. Passive evil is when something needs to be said but isn't, when someone needs to do something and no one does. Our descendants will look back on us in horror. At best, they will study us as a cautionary tale. They'll blot out what the ancestors were doing now from their genealogies. At worst, we won't have any descendants. And so, what if alt his? This has been seen by 10.3 million people. What he's talking about here is our shadow, what fiat has suppressed by having no accountability, by having fiat money and having the funding mechanisms to create sludge people like Hillary Clinton, to create the blob, otherwise known as the architecture of deceit that we have seen because of the work of Mike Benz and others that have shown how propaganda is created. It's what I predicted a long time ago. It is exactly within the framework of the psychological engine I talk about with Bitcoin. It is the shadow. It is the suppressed negative thoughts, but you can't help but get them out. There's something inevitable about these thoughts. There's something inevitable about the individual shadow, about the collective unconscious being repressed in a society. It will find its way out. This is physics. This was known by Jung. This was very understood. And when I think of the process of individuation, which is about integrating your shadow and evolving, just like I said, we're on a pathway towards a certain type of evolution. We're on a pathway towards a certain type of enlightenment with Bitcoin memetics, like Don't Trust Verify, like proof of work. But again, it is this different system. We're all about action versus stewing in your negative thoughts and in your corrupted self-conscious shadow that is filled with all your worst urges and failings and all the other troubles that you've had. But of course, it begins with encountering your shadow, admitting there is a shadow. And so the shadow of America can be found, of course, in Russia, and its ties to, of course, the Epstein files, which is still on top of everyone's mind, because it is drawing up all of these repressed dark ideas and thoughts that have permeated American culture and helped sink American culture in the last few years. And remember, encounter is a big part of it because it is the nature of fiat money and all of these financial dealings that you can't count. There is no way to count sludge money. It's what creates sludge people. It's what creates sludge minds. It's the soft, oozing slime that you get from this type of fat, unfit thinking and lazy ideas. And that's why it's coming out, right? You've got our favorite Max Kaiser saying it exactly, saying the presence of Bitcoin's immutable truth on the global stage pushed the Epstein scandal out of the shadows. Out of the shadows. Now he's using just out of the shadows in a simple metaphor. I think he wouldn't disagree if you mentioned the way I used this shadow, this idea of a suppressed subconscious. And of course, it is bringing everything out here. Most of the Trust the Plan folks now realizing this is the greatest show on earth. What many people said was going to happen, which was this kayfabe wrestling situation where now people are demanding. I basically was able to tell everyone last night, and not one person blinked an eye about Tom Cruise dropping these people from space in a space drop. Everyone wants this now. They're like, yeah, this a couple years ago when I told you Tom Cruise would drop people from spaceships to do a Nuremberg thing sounded obviously insane, right? Not anymore. Everyone gets it now. And that's what we're seeing, right? Mr. Poole says they're falling faster than we can count in the last 24 hours. Leslie Wexner, billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret, that's Les Wexner, subpoenaed. We'll hear about him. Pritzker, Casey Wasserman, UK police, 180,000 images. New York Times confirmed today the Epstein files contain an estimate 180,000 photographs, not documents, not emails, photographs of what, of whom, in what rooms, on what island. They haven't told us yet, but Trump's DOJ has them all. And Bondi said more is coming. Ask yourself, why are billionaires resigning before the photos drop? Because they know what's in them. Scoreboard, day 18, resignations, 20 plus, countries investigating, 8 criminal raids, 4 subpoenas issued, 12 plus UN declaration crimes against humanity. Obama had 8 years, 0. Biden had 4 years, 0. Trump needed 18 days, and they're still falling. Every morning, a new name. Every evening, a new resignation. They can't stop it now. Nothing can stop what is coming. Gary Cardone says the same. Nothing can stop the unraveling now. That's why we use the Bitcoin meme in this. Nothing stops this train. It's the same meme. It's the same thing. Just like we've understood from psychology, nothing stops the shadow from emerging. We've understood that. That's what creates mental illness. That's what creates the type of mental illness our society seems afflicted by today. This is a psychological engine, and replacing the engine is what we're doing. We're replacing the engine with new incentives and actually building, actually doing stuff, right? And now, when you look at the battleground going forward, it is about whether or not the mental illness can be frozen, whether it can be managed, or whether it can be cured by actually seeing, exactly like what if Alt has said. We've been not talking and denying ourselves what's going on. This is the problem, but it comes out anyway. You can't stop it, right? So, what forces could stop this from happening now? What forces could stop a full conversation about Epstein, about Russia, about the history of banking, about the history of this cabal? What could stop it at this point? Very little, very, very difficult. Let's look at the forces that could try, that would want to, that might want to, right? It's places like Blue Sky, for example, where you get a lot of folks with the mental illness out there. And here's Will Stansel, who's no fan of Trump. This guy is a big supporter of anti-ICE protests. This is his Blue Sky social, and things aren't going well there for him. Here he is, in their little echo chamber saying, man, every day I wonder if I shouldn't just delete my account on here, maybe. Opening Blue Sky makes me want to actually walk in front of a truck. I don't think people on here understand how crazy they've gotten. This comes from no feedback loops. This comes from not integrating your shadow. This comes from no encounter, no accountability. This is what happens. In the endless feedback loop of self-radicalization built around some of the most toxic personalities I've ever encountered, it would be nice to talk about politics without being in a blizzard of seething hatred and abuse all the time. They're largely blocked. They've blocked me, but it doesn't matter because we share a social space and many of them have tens of thousands of followers, and absolute derangement is making the social space intolerable. So it ain't going to remember threads, blue sky. It ain't going to work. It's not strong enough. And indeed, it's definitely not going to come from any moral preening anymore because, again, go back to the Russia, and how we're finally getting that conversation relitigated. It looks like Brennan is going to be subpoenaed, right? Here's the Brennan subpoena. New John Brennan subpoenas issued. Brennan is under investigation for his role in fabricating the 2016 intelligence community assessment, which found that President Trump helped Putin install Trump. Putin helped install Trump. New subpoenas issued. That's in the LA Times today. Hans Monkey here says the same about what's going on with the Susan Rice story, saying the following. There's a breaking revelation about how they reacted, which I'll read in a second. Here, Paul Sperry writes it. But basically, we found out how they reacted when it happened, and they apparently cried. Obama, remember, they made everyone wear black after. Hans Monkey says these new revelations fit squarely with Obama's documented actions, specifically his direction that John Brennan and James Comey adopt the Hillary Clinton campaign's Russia collusion narrative. The key difference was the delivery mechanism. Instead of laundering the claim through a fabricated dossier, they embedded it in an intelligence community assessment asserting that Putin got Trump elected, a claim they knew to be false. The underlying intelligence, finally released last year by Tulsi Gabbard, showed that Putin had in fact preferred Hillary Clinton to win. It was a total fraud carried out at the highest levels, and yet no one, absolutely no one, has been held to account, which is what I think you're going to start to see from now on. And indeed, here, the actual story was breaking. President Obama and his national security advisor, Susan Rice, were so distraught after Trump won in 2016, they literally broke down and cried in front of the White House staff, according to 1,100 hours of new audio and video compiled by Columbia University in cooperation with the Obama Foundation. After all they'd built, they feared their accomplishments were at risk of being torn down by a con man and a clown, ergo Trump had to be stopped. Cynical Publius saying, remember when everyone in the White House had to wear all black the next day? Theater kids. And Obama was the theater kid in chief. So the crying, the lying, what you have is this psychological problem that happened when they lost. They knew they'd lied. It looks like they made actions to prevent that. It looks exactly as it seems at this point. You can see the incentives and why they did it. And now, I think it's funny that they say theater kids here. Now, his building isn't going to do it either, right? That's from the building opening is where we're getting this information. It's from the building. It's from the word building, right? So the word building ain't going to convince anyone either. But the theater kids, right? So again, it's now a battle of persuasion. It's a battle of how we're going to frame the Russia, the 2026 midterms, election systems in general, election integrity in general. And Trump is going to be bringing his kayfabe, his Epstein drip, his audits. He's going to be bringing his voter integrity stuff. He's going to be bringing proof of work. He's going to be bringing don't trust, verify, two of the most important memes to the table that will actually have effects on people's minds and worldviews. And if you compare what he's doing to the theater kids thing, you got to look at their persuasion capacity. It's theater kids versus Trump's kayfabe, greatest show on earth. Everyone's sucked in. What's happening with Epstein? What's happening with this? What's happening with that? So it's theater kids, right? It's this guy here. Journalists, they're not going to do it, right? This is the guy trying to give you the fuck you, right? This is him listening to the Rubio speech. So this little troglodyte here, too ugly, too stupid to do anything. So zero persuasion there. Giving Trump the finger, not quite the sauce they need to win, right? Not quite the sauce they need to win. Oh, I didn't bring that up. This guy here, right? This is the guy giving him the finger the whole time. They've identified him, right? Clip of Bloomberg reporter giving the finger totally. I mean, he looks a little downy. My brother works with Down syndrome. I don't mean it as a insult. I'm a big fan of the Downs folks. They're some of the best Christians and Americans you'll ever find. So I just mean he looks like he's missing a chromosome. That's all I'm saying. He's a journalist. Zero persuasion. Back to the theater kids thing, right? This is the theater show they did to show about Pretty and Good. Pretty Good, the best interpretation of what happened by Renee Good and Alex Pretty. Gavin McInnes says art is a very important vessel for conveying truth. This dancing performance art does exactly that. It perfectly conveys how the actions of Pretty and Good were unbelievably fucking gay. I don't want to swear. Kid warning. You get more theater kid stuff here. This is Europe. This is advanced stuff, guys. Watch this. Really powerful. Like you're gonna like, oh my god, I don't even want to know about Russia collusion. I don't even want to know about the Epstein files anymore. I'm cool. I don't want to know equality. Sorry. What's this one? Democracy. Okay. Maranafal saying this was just posted by the official account. Values. It's theater kids, guys. This is the theater they're going with, and it's just too weak. This is the kind of Hillary Clinton human capital they're going with. They're going with moral high ground, right? Here's Obama's old lawyer, more theater kid stuff. She said that Trump, of course, had debased the sacrosanct office of the president. Kathy Rumler was Bill Clinton's lawyer. Kathy was sleeping with married Epstein personal lawyer at the time she was in the White House. She did numerous deals with the Obama DOJ for Epstein clients, such as the Rothschilds, with one deal alone paying her 10 million US trash tokens and Epstein 25 million US trash tokens. Rumler emailed with Epstein more than 11,000 times, had numerous meetings with him. Rumler received luxury gifts from Uncle Jeffrey. Him, such as first class trips abroad, handbags worth over $9,000. So the moral high ground argument also not going to work. And again, also the worded building not going to work. Roman Helmet Guy says there's no beauty to the building or the letters themselves, but if you put the effort in to read the words and really grapple with their meaning, there's no beauty in them either. It's indistinguishable from L's and T's, E's, indistinguishable from F's. Multiple words get disjointed, not just one plain, but two. Truly one of the most headache-inducing reading experiences I've ever had. This is his actual presidential library. It couldn't be better. It's perfect. We should keep that for all time. And again, so think of all this, theater, those words, the theater kids, the fake news, Hillary Clinton's low skills. And here, War Clandestine reminds us, you might not have noticed it, but Trump and his team have been giving the public a crash course on the deep state. The JFK files were Deep State 101. The message was that JFK was killed in trying to expose the monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that embedded itself within our government. JFK was assassinated because he was trying to expose and destroy the deep state. Then a few months later, Tulsi came out with the bombshell report that Obama and his intelligence heads manufactured the Russia hoax as part of the treasonous conspiracy. This was the next phase of disclosure for the public. First, they were shown that a deep state exists via the JFK files. Then they were shown that the deep state still exists today and is trying to get rid of Trump, just like they got rid of JFK. Now we are on to the Epstein files. Now the public are being shown that Epstein was connected to the Democrats, and he was also connected to the global elite like the Rothschilds and the House of Saud. Now we are wading into expert territory like 300, 400 level class. Now we're on to transnational criminal organizations and crimes against humanity. Understanding this phase of disclosure would not have been feasible without the first steps. In conclusion, I think we are being briefed in a calculated fashion, not a random one. I think the public are slowly being downloaded on the depth of the corruption. I think we are methodically going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of disclosure. I think there's a method to the madness. We are on the timeline, which means the timeline has a projected endpoint. Patience, it is working. Indeed, this is exactly what we've been saying for a long time. And now, luckily, with Russia, we're also maybe with Russia, also going to get to the bottom of some of the divisive type of things that go on inside of the MAGA Trump Republican movement. Many people talking for a while now about Bannon and what's going on. I don't know the answers. But it looks like Roger Stone does, and I've been paying close attention to Roger Stone's comments on Bannon. And again, Russia, just as I predicted, a real vetting of Russia will expose everything we need to know all of this Israel, Iran, all of this stuff, Trump is controlled by Israel. This all came from Steve Bannon. It all came from whatever he was doing. And here Roger Stone underlines it. My problem with Steve began when he testified under oath to the House Intelligence Committee, as I did, and correctly said he and I never discussed WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, or the emails Democrats were claiming had been stolen. But then, to my surprise of the MAGA movement, Steve popped up as a Mueller witness at my trial and said the direct opposite, essentially perjuring himself and siding with the Mueller witch hunt in a trial against me that was meant to take down President Trump. George Washington University Law School professor Turley noted the inconsistencies and told the New York Post, hey, he has two diametrically opposite sworn statements. I first noted a story in the New York Post reporting that Steve Bannon had been entering Epstein's palatial home in Manhattan in 2018. The New York Post. So, by the way, a friend of mine at Coindesk saw him go in there one day. In fact, someone from a friend of Gab, the platform Gab, who I knew in New York, who I was meeting with, said, I just saw Steve Bannon go into that house. Just a second. Just a second. My mom was on the phone. So indeed, here, who cozies up to a man then convicted of crimes in Florida involving children? I said so on InfoWars at the time. Communication between Bannon and Epstein recently declassified by the DOJ, showing Trump calling him stupid, calling for his removal as president under the 25th Amendment, and bragging about Bannon's undermining of Trump's China trade policy. Bannon pleaded guilty to defrauding donors of the We Build the Wall nonprofit. Bannon would then be named and as an unindicted co-conspirator. So I did not see Bannon coming. I didn't see this coming. I did not. I will admit that. But this looks bad. Bannon began attacking Musk when Musk began calling for full disclosure regarding Epstein. Bannon claimed that Elon was not a legitimate U.S. citizen and demanded that Musk lose all federal government contracts such as SpaceX and Starlink. Elon said Bannon would be in the Epstein files and that Bannon will yet go to prison. I believe Elon will be proven completely right about Bannon. Bannon went to prison because he decided to completely ignore a subpoena from the House Investigatory Committee. Here we see more. It's widely believed that Bannon was paying and continues to pay a small army of influencers, many of whom seem to be silent regarding these shocking disclosures. The claim that it was all for a documentary won't wash because Bannon is in the Epstein emails coaching Epstein about how to act, saying, first, we need to push back on the lies, then crush the pedo bike trafficking narrative, then rebuild your image as a philanthropist. It was a documentary. It was a documentary to redeem Epstein. Was Steve getting paid or was the payoff yet to come? Indeed, Bannon was scheduled to visit the man he called God and brother in the emails only 2 days after Epstein was arrested and landed in his private jet in Paris at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. The name appears in the Epstein files because in an email, Epstein complains to Bannon about an interview I did on InfoWars in which I was connected Epstein to the Clintons. I'm damn proud of that. That is my beef with Steve Bannon. And he signs MAGA Roger Stone. So Roger Stone being, I think, someone who has a lot of credibility, and I think Roger Stone, remember, is the person who taught me before MAGA and everything about what happened to Kennedy. And I knew him because I've been a longtime fan of Richard Nixon and knew that the Nixon thing was a scam from the first day. And Roger Stone, before Trump was even around, helped me understand that stuff. So we love Roger Stone, indeed. And here's the good news, everyone. Just like I said yesterday, as we move forward, as things continue to build, remember, it's the theater kids, it's all of these old tricks versus the greatest show on earth, versus the entire drama that Trump is holding. And remember, everyone demanding these 9/11 files that are missing from the Epstein files, that's punctuation. That is timed so that when the demand for it is highest, we can finally see what happened. And Brett Weinstein here theorizing hypothesis. World Trade Center 7 was supposed to be hit by UA Flight 93, and its collapse was intended to destroy evidence of many elite crimes, including 9/11 itself. The destruction of Flight 93 instead rendered the collapse of WTC 7 the smoking gun of 9/11. Yep, respect, says Simon. And don't know if that's true, but I do believe we are going to find out more about what happened at that point pretty soon. So there you go. Yeah, Steve. There you go, everyone. There we go. Love the down. We love the downs. We love the downs. Purpose shouldn't be so unattainable. Indeed. Nolan Stradamus. So short Canadian economy, Future Hodl says. I don't know about short the Canadian economy. Short the Canadian banks. They're in trouble. I'd say that's one of your vehicles to do so. And it looks like I've got Hank in the house, everyone. So please, everyone, get ready to welcome Hank. I'm going to turn the screen on and bring him.
Oh, hello. Hank in the house. Watch out. How's it going, Nolan?
I am enthusiastic about the future.
Oh, your optimism is both palpable and encouraging to the rest of us. We appreciate and love it, Nolan. What have you guys been talking about on the Great Awakening this morning?
Well, we started with a little bit of a Canadian discussion. The Prime Minister of Canada was in the news. He gave his French is like so bad that I couldn't play it. He had to learn French to become Prime Minister.
Sacre bleu.
It's
unbelievable.
Yours is much better already. Much better.
We'll take it.
So he gave a speech trying to rebuke Marco Rubio's speech in Munich about the shared Christian heritage of Europe and America. And so in French, Mark Carney actually went and said, no, Canada's history is, in fact, civic institutions, and it's just patently not true. It's the Canadian Constitution. Even the Quebecers who are trying to make their state completely atheist acknowledges was entirely Christian from day one, and that's exactly what it was. And so I used a quote that Elon Musk had this morning, which was that prediction is the best sign of intelligence, or the best proof of intelligence. So predicting the future, being able to predict the future, which is something I say on my show a lot. It's something that I got from Scott Adams, which is if you make predictions, that's why we make predictions in public all the time, because if you make a prediction and it comes true, it means the worldview you had when you made the prediction was accurate enough to understand the dynamics. And it's like in sports, if you can predict who wins, it's a very simple version of this, right? Shit happens, of course, and you don't know the future, but I had made this prediction that Canada was toast from pretty early on, and the day after Trump was elected president in 2024, I actually did my whole show that day on how it impacted Canada, and I said it's the end of Canada, and it won't survive. And so it looks more and more like that, and it looks like Mark Carney is hell-bent on destroying the entire country. So, and then I saw one of my predictions I made on your show recently, because I started talking about how you can predict where this is going forward, and we talked a bit about the American system, so this Japan deal, being a part of it, and also the leaked details of the Russian peace plan, which includes a bridge between Russia and Alaska, and would involve Russia getting access to Alaskan resource extraction. So, making predictions based on economic systems is kind of what we did today, and that what we're really seeing here is the systems competing.
Not that surprising. You're kind of like, you ever heard of like the phrase in the betting community, sharps? They're the guys who are the good bettors who had to make the lines. You're like the sharp for like the geopolitics of the future. It's like you're making those predictions before they happen. you and Polymarket should work out some kind of deal together.
Well,
'Cause, you always got the
believe
beat.
it or not, I'm there might be a Roxham Polymarket show featuring
Oh.
myself and someone else coming up. So it's getting cooked up currently. So there you go.
I can't wait to place money on your prognostications. I'm very excited for that future,
There you
Nolan.
go.
And
So
I'm
what do
very
we got
excited to
going
have
on next. Tell me about the immediate short-term future.
Yes. We got a lot of stuff going on. We're talking more about the conflict with Iran. Are we going to war? Maybe. I don't know. We've seen this story before in other ways. We're talking about I think it was a congressman who said he'd rather have dogs over Muslim people. So that's fun. We got some good Bitcoin stories today. Naka, PayJoin. There's a lot going on. And I think we might be joined by a special guest in our hour. And we have two special guests, Frank Corva and another one coming up in our second hour. So packed show today. I'll let you finish up with your team here at Great Awakening. Everybody stay tuned for Roxham TV News. Nolan will be joining us in just a few.
See you later, Hank.
See you, Nolan. Thanks.
All right, folks. That was Hank. Indeed. Come around and check me out on Hank's show next. I'm about to play the ad followed by the thanks for coming screen. Just want to say to you, thanks for coming. What an episode full of goodies, Noah says. Thank you for that review. Indeed. Thanks, everyone. I'm not going to get to all of the comments. We're running a little low on time, but indeed, I'm about to play the ad. You're going to see the thanks for watching screen. Thanks for watching. Peace. See you tomorrow or on Hank Show next.